Here. Thank you, ma'am. Um, okay, so where was I? You're joining us in progress. We started a few minutes ago, so you'll have to go backwards in time before the Beit in Breshit to hear what you didn't hear. Those of you who are watching this on the recording. So letting go and surrendering to, allowing enchantment to take over, allowing the child inside of us to see the world without boundaries. And I'm really talking more towards infant, and Reb Marcia gets into that too. So, the concept of names. One of the first things that I do with a group of people in my storytelling workshops, and some of you have been with me and Renee when we've offered them, is for people to share their names with each other, because every name has a story, doesn't it? So my name is Mark, and okay, it's one of those names where that's all I've been called my whole lifetime, and if you call me by that name, I will respond to it. But in recent years, Moshe ben Avraham va'Osnat, which is Moshe Be'er ben Avraham va'Osnat, it just resonates a whole lot more for me, my Hebrew name. And I have to believe that my parents named me that because that's who I was. Well, Moshe Bear is from my grandfather, Morris, which came to mind, Reb Deb, when you told me where you are, in Morris County. So, well, that's my grandfather's county. And Ben Avraham va'Osnat, my parents' names, my father's name was Abraham and my mother's name was Lena, but no one knew them by those names. So this is another quirky thing in my family about names, is that even though my father's name is Abraham, everyone knew him as Adolf. And even though my mother had the beautiful name Lena, no one ever called her Lena. My uncle called her Osni for Osnat, but he was the only one, but everybody called her Elsie. Don't ask. It's one of those many things that, when our parents, why didn't we ask them when they were still here when we could answer these questions? With my father, I was like, you served in World War II. How could you call yourself Adolf? Well, he spelled it differently. But, I'll never know the answer to that question. But anyway, Moshe Be'er ben Avraham va'Osnat rings a lot more for me these days. But I haven't gone the full way of asking to people to call me Moshe. I actually thought that my middle name Be'er was spelled with an aleph all of these years, because in English it's spelled Bayer. And why I made that leap to think it was spelled with an aleph, I don't know. But the very first time I met Reb Zalman, who he's nodding his approval back here, I'm going to tell the story, was online for lunch at Ohala, at my very first Ohala. And I'm standing with one of the only people I know there, my friend David Schneier, who Susan Freiban knows very well, and other of you here. And we're discussing my name. And I say to David, my name is Moshe Bear. Ah, Moshe Bear. I said, how do you spell that? He says, I said, Beit Aleph Resh. He said, no, you're wrong. It's spelled Beit Ayin Resh. He said, no, it can't be that. I've been spelling it with an aleph my whole life. He said, but that's not right. So what does Beit Ayin Resh mean? What does Beit Aleph Resh mean? I loved Beit Aleph Resh because that's a well, right? And Moshe was drawn from the water. But David said, yeah, but with an ayin is like levaer, to be on fire, to be a fire, right? Like the flame was at this scene where God says, who sent me? And God says, tell him that Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh sent you. So that's a circuitous route to get back to that, right? So David said, no, it's with an ayin. I said, okay, but I think it's with an aleph. Reb Zalman's standing 2 people in front of us in line. And David says, Reb Zalman, tell Moshe Bear that his middle name is spelled with an ayin, not an aleph. And Reb Zalman famously said to me, famous to me, Jager's into hate. Whatever he wants to think, let him think. So that was my introduction to Reb Zalman. So the question is, does your name resonate with you in an essential way? So Reb Marcia goes into, of course, um, the word shalom and how it doesn't really mean hello and goodbye. And you all read, I don't need to go over all of that. By the way, you'll notice if you read this week's Torah portion that God enters into a relationship with Pinchas, who a zealot who slays a couple because of them having sex in public and for other reasons too. God forms a Brit Shalom, and because of this act of zealotry, the Brit Shalom, the covenant of peace, is broken a little bit, because the Vav in Shalom, if you look at a text, if you look at the Torah, at the actual Masoretic text, you'll see that the Vav is broken in the middle. And of course, the rabbis, we need to comment about everything and figure it, because everything is important and everything has meaning. And so some of the commentaries say is that it's because this is not a real true peace, right? Which is really more a wholeness, that shalom brings to mind. But she says at the end of page 73, each act of naming things brings us into relationship with the world. The words we use to name the world around us inform the way we understand what everything is and what it means. Every time I name, I define that relationship. I frame it with my concept. I think partly that means when you say chair and I say chair, we see different things, right? There is a concept overall that frames the whole thing, and that's the essence of the thing. And of course, when she gets into of Adam, Adam naming the animals, he knows because he can see into their essence, right? He sees their DNA, their actual, what are those called? The helixes, the double helixes. He can see into the essential nature of things. So that's how he knows what to call them. And it's not just a name, because the name is made up of letters, and the letters are holy. So if letters are the building blocks of creation, which is according to our myth and according to our daily prayer. So here's a question. What is the daily prayer? That expresses what I just said. And Deb Smith, you are not eligible to answer the question right now until we give other people a chance. What is, and we daven it every day, every time we meet at Moshe. It's towards the beginning. It has to do with words.
What's the question?
The question is, what is the prayer that expresses that what everything that we see and touch is the result of letters coming together into combinations and permutations, right? Yeah, Stephen.
Is it Modani?
It is not. No, whoever answers it right will get a buzzer or get a bell, ding, ding, ding. What is it? Okay, now I'll tell you in English what it is. Blessed is the one who spoke and the world came into being. Ding, 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 high alert. Yes, Baruch
Is it right? It's right, right?
Yeah, well, you wouldn't have gotten the ding if it wasn't right.
Yes, yes, but you got it wrong and you did a ding. So it's,
no, I gave it a buzz. That was the wrong one. It's kind of like in Family Feud. And feud, by the way, is one of those words. English is a weird language. F-E-U-D. Come on. How do you get feud from that? Feud. Anyway, yes, Baruch she'amar v'haya olam. That is our daily testimony to the gift of entering into this understanding, this magic. And when I say magic, I mean the magic of abracadabra, abracadabra, what was Created was spoken. Does everybody hear that? Abracadabra? Yeah. That's what it's all about, Alfie. What Baruch Shemar v'haya olam. Blessed is the one who spoke and the world came into being. And the Degel Mekane Ephraim, the grandson of Rashi, no, the grandson of the Baal Shem Tov, he goes one step further to explain that the world as we know it is just one possible world. According to Midrashim, is that God tried to create many worlds before, and God was not happy with any of them. And because the letters spilled out, they had to glom together eventually. They attracted to each other, right? And they formed stuff. Right? So just like the periodic table works, letters and numbers become stuff. And that's the idea. So, and that's the idea when naming things too, right? It's this not he's like helter skelter. He named the animals just something came to him, but that is what the understanding is in Parshat Bereshit. Okay. We, as newborn infants, we're in the middle of the first paragraph, 74. I'm jumping around a little bit here, but that's okay. As newborn infants, we experience no difference between ourself and the world. Our sensations and feelings were all that existed. And the end of that paragraph, I underlined, there is only a flow of feeling, right? Consciousness emerging gradually brings with it the awareness of patterns and distinctions. So, for those of you familiar with the spheres, right, with the sphirot, what's on top? You got Chachma Bina, right? Right, Da. Chachma, first is wisdom, and wisdom is pure consciousness, right? And then you get to Bina, that's Lahavin, to understand. That's where things start to separate. That's where we have the ability to see one thing from the other, and that's what she's talking about right here. There is a me and there's a not me. When an infant begins to realize that the mother is a separate self, a separate entity than she is. Mama, she has a name. The world around me emerges with all its possibilities. There is so much, and everything has a name, right? So then Rabbi Marcia, she inspired me, because then she talks about at the bottom of, say, 74, the miracle worker. Is there anybody here who never saw the miracle worker or not know the story? Okay, we all know the story. So I have a little treat for you, because I wanted to go see that scene that she was talking about, and I'm going to share that with you. It's the scene in which Anne Sullivan, right, and Helen are together at the water pump, right? And all of a sudden, it all comes together in her consciousness, right? First of all, that thing's not just separate, but every separate thing has a name. So enjoy. It's just a couple of minutes long.
W-A-T-E-R, water. It has a name. W-A-T. Whoa. 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 Yes. Oh, my dear. Round. Yes. Pump. Yes.
I don't know about you, but I just got goosebumps 3 times. Yes, Deborah.
I have never seen this movie, but I read the book when I was in grade 4, and that was my favorite scene, only I've never seen it.
Wow.
I only read it.
Wow.
It was incredible.
Incredible. So that's, of course, Anne Bancroft playing Anne Sullivan and Patty Duke playing Helen Keller. And I know there was a remake where Patty Duke plays Anne Sullivan. But if you notice that the explosion of understanding that happens in her when she gets it, right? Where concepts become words, they get named, and the importance of that. And this scene is so powerful. This is why I wanted to show it, because I think it really illustrates what's happening when we get things as an intuitive explosion, an understanding. So what's the explosion that happens in Baruch She'amar, page 76? And please remember, when we quote unquote translate Baruch She'amar, V'haya Olam, blessed is the one who spoke and everything, and poof, came into being. Don't get caught up in the anthropomorphic, that God has a mouth and God speaks. We're so limited in our language to be able to get at what is hinted at there. As we have seen, first paragraph, middle of 76. As we have seen, this teaching is embedded in the story of creation in which the Holy One speaks creation into being. All the material and spiritual energies constituting the totality of creation are born by being called. And if you go to the next paragraph, Rabbi Marcia takes aim at translations, right? In the same way that I just did, or similarly, that let there be light seriously understates the terse, active, and expresses quality of the Hebrew yehi or. And I love the way she goes through this. An imperative voice, what it really means is light, exist, come forth. It comes closer, more descriptive of the process. And God expressed, and then she unfolds it even more. And God expressed, and think of the word expressed, right? Things we express it like when we have expressed what things come out when we express things, what I'm talking about. And God expressed all letter energies combining to manifest physical and spiritual light. That's great. It's great. And it's so that next time we sing Baruch She'amar, Keep that in mind. All letter energies combining to manifest physical and spiritual light. Be. That certainly captures it a lot better. Top of page 77. One of the ways we are created in the divine image is that with our utterances, we too create worlds of meaning, which is why Lashon Hara, what comes out of our mouth is just so important in Jewish thought and Jewish practice. Okay, we don't practice it very well, most of us, but it is very, very, very high up there in the ways that we need to be careful. And it's because exactly like this, because of this. The world came into being because of words. It continues to be in existence because of God's creative energy. In using language, we carve out meaning from chaos. We invoke our power as co-creators. This is why in Torah we read that the first assignment given to the newly created first human is to name the other creatures. Adam's first job. Bottom of the page. What is God's name? Somebody read it? Oh, don't everybody jump at once. Thank you, Hoff. Go ahead.
What is God's name?
I asked that first.
What is my name? What is your name? What is God's name? Our name is that we must be born, and the Creator's name is to bear. The soul alone among all creatures is generative like God is.
What do you make of that, Hoff?
It's a toughie.
Yeah, it is.
Wait, let me, what was it? What is my name? What is your name? What is God's name? Our name is, we must be born. The Creator's name is to bear. The soul alone among all creatures, gentle like God. I like to feel like there's some flexibility in here somewhere.
Go ahead, play with it.
About just like what Reb Zalman said when you were talking about how you wanted to spell your name, and he said, Sei gesund, let him spell it however he wants it.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of freedom and flexibility to name something the way it felt right to you. And that somewhere in there, I see some of this in terms of flexibility about what you can do in naming things.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? No? Okay. We can come back to it. The second part of this is much more difficult for me to understand than the first part. The first part to me says that our name is that we're going to come into being, right? It's because it's our nature. It's our nature to come into being. And the Creator's name is to bear. In other words, there's a partnership here. That there is the one who brings things into being, and they're the ones that are brought into being. And the things that are brought into being through the word. The soul alone among all creatures is generative like God is. So calling the soul a creature, I think here is throwing us off a little bit. And I think what it's saying is that the soul creates other souls. The soul creates other manifestations of itself that goes beyond the physical self. So we can travel far outside our physical limitations to arrive at someplace that basically jams our left brain. If to name is to take a journey into essence, okay? Everybody following that? Because that is what we just read. Our name is that we must be born, and the Creator's name is to bear. That's the journey into essence. How could we imagine knowing the name of God? Aha! The Tukane Zohar reminds us, no thought at all can grasp God. Lek Bakshava Tifsal Bak Kolal. No thought at all can grasp God. To name and to define, and also therefore to confine, to limit. How can we describe the essence transcending all essence? Naming is an act of calling into being. Can we call God into being? Ah, there's the rub. How can we call God anything? Which is probably the hinted at Ehiyah Asher Ehiyah. God is saying, you can't catch me. I'm the gingerbread God. Right? Don't think that you can confine me. Haf.
I want to reconfirm my earlier position and feel that when you talk about soul and when you talk about God, there's a lot of individual interpretation that can go into that. And I think that's one of the things I'm loving about Jewish renewal is the ability to partly create what your belief system is in with those names. And so the name is not in cement. The name may be in cement, but you're allowed to play with the cement as it fits your own belief system. And I like
Can I rephrase just so I understand what you're saying? That we can arrive. We're freer to arrive. There's more expansive understanding of what God's name is, because we're lucky to inherit the Hasidic and mystical traditions that enable us to wrestle with all of that, what you just said. So it's not just Jewish renewal, of course, but you finding yourself in Jewish renewal. Hey, listen, I didn't know any of this stuff. This all stuff is like secrets in Hebrew school, and most of the things that we learned, from then anyway too. To name is to define, and to limit. What does that mean? I think we're talking. I have my understanding of avodah zarah, why it, the idea of idol worship, and why it's the most repeated no. There's the most don't do that, or else there's going to be bad things going to happen. In Tanakh about avodah zarah, and there are lots of bad things that happen because of avodah zarah. Right? This week's parsha is the continuation of last week's parsha, where the Israelites get mixed up, with avodah zarah and messing around with the women, right, of the Moabites, right? And so that's where Pinchas's, spear and his act of that earns him the Brit Shalom comes from. It comes from avodah zarah. But I want to try to put it into a different a different idea that I want to share with you, and I'd love to hear, and I'll stop and what you all think idol worship, avodah zarah, which means basically strange worship. Like, what I think it's getting at is you can't defining God is to limit God, and God is unlimited, right? The concept, just like the Zohar says, no thought at all can grasp God. And how that works, I think, sometimes in relationships is when we say, and Haf, I'm going to use you here. Haf, he's my friend. I know Haf. And when I say that, I am taking so much for granted that I know you, and I'm never going to know you. In everything that makes you, right? And what happens is when we say that, when we see somebody who we have known for years and years and years, by entering into the relationship again with all our preconceptions based upon what's happened before, we limit that person's capacity to extend themselves, to potentialize themselves, and we hold them in that very fixed place of our own limited understandings. And we keep them trapped in that. And us too become trapped. I hope that makes some kind of sense to you, because that is my feeble attempt to understand avodah zarah in a relational concept. Anybody have any thoughts about that, or what you're thinking of, Deb?
So I was just thinking, as you were talking about boundaries and fluid boundaries and fixed boundaries, and between, people in relationships and how we know them. And if the boundaries are really rigid, then it's limiting, right? You can't go beyond that boundary, and you're sort of in your concept, and it is what you think of them, and that's who they are. But if the boundaries are more fluid if they're more permeable, it allows for more expansion and different ways of knowing.
Right. Absolutely. And the word permeable is a beautiful, beautiful way to express that. But, yeah, Roxanne.
I think that to define God, a lot of definition is what a thing is not. So if you were saying this is an orange, the desk is not an orange, and my phone is not an orange. There's a lot in definitions about what something is not. And as soon as you say that God is not something, then you've limited God. By naming God, it limits God so that everything else is not God. It doesn't keep you in that space of everything being an emanation from God.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah, it does. And we all know that the G word, it really needs to be replaced. I once did a workshop with Matthew Fox. Matt Fox is a theologian and just an amazing guy, deeply ecumenical. And in the workshop, he says, we need a different name to God, to relate to. Maybe something like Gotti. It's like gut in you, my little Gotti. Something that's more pettable than God. Because that traps us in, all that Old Testament crap of that being the God who punishes, and Jesus, Christianity overtaking that, which is why Reb Zalman came up with the idea of the Elder Testament and the Younger Testament, right, to refer to both. Okay, but let's not go there. Anybody else have anything about Avodah Zarah that you wanted to share? Any thoughts? Yeah, don't worshiping cats, however, is allowed, because we all know that dogs have owners and cats have staff.
That's right.
So, page 80, middle of the page, at best. At best, God, like president, is a job description. Far better used as a verb than a noun. Everybody who agrees, put your hand up. That's right, I see everybody's hand. Okay, great. We need unanimous decision there. I want to point to actually a tradition. There's a phrase in Hebrew, Shem v'malchut. And Shem means name, and Malchut means kingdom. But it refers to Adonai Eloheinu Melech. So Adonai Melech, right? What do you say? Eloheinu Melech. So there are times when the name has to be followed by the job description. So God as king, for instance, right? So it kind of puts things together in a kind of nice way, because it's like seeing God in the prism of a jewel, where if you turn it a little bit, you'll see a different aspect of the jewel. If you turn it a little bit more, you'll see a different aspect. The same is true with divinity. So the idea of a job description within a particular context is a worthwhile idea. And keep an eye on that, as you read liturgy, of where that comes up. If you happen to own a Reconstructionist prayer book, all the names for God is like strewn through the entire thing, because they really trying really hard not to be fixed in this idea of Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam, which is what we tried to do during Birkot HaShachar, just to free us, to liberate us from concepts that just don't work anymore for us. And that's one of the things, too, that Jewish renewal, I think, has been at the forefront of. But I don't know when the Reconstructionist prayer book was created and when that started. Kaplan around the same time. Anyway, yeah, Dan.
So Yeah, I mean, all the stuff in the Reconstructionist Siddur is really about God's um, manifestations or qualities, the compassionate one, things like that. Because we can't know who God is, but we can experience godly qualities, or we can experience godly energy and things like that. Um, when you name something, you're limiting it and you're trying to define it. And I like what was said about what it is, what it is and what it isn't. Trying to define that way and put boundaries around it. But that it just sort of defeats the purpose, and that's what idol worship is. It's trying to either a physical manifestation or a particular quality or a value that you'd say that's what God is. That's an idol because it's too focused, too narrow. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's what brings up for me.
Great, thank you. Thank you. Judy.
So a couple of you know this story, but I'll just bring the rest of you up to speed. 4 weeks ago, I was sitting across from a date. He sat down 5 minutes before, and suddenly he became unresponsive, and I thought he might be having a seizure, but actually his heart had stopped. And he was making a weird breathing sound, and I stood up and I yelled for somebody to call 911. And I said, somebody call 911, I need help here. And people rushed over and they laid the guy down on the ground and they started CPR. Somebody ran into the building and got the automatic defibrillator. He was shocked once. And he came back. We were outside at this restaurant, and when the staff yelled, is there a doctor, is there a nurse? People came over, they did the CPR, they got the defibrillator, then the paramedics came and took him to the hospital. And the next day when I went to see the guy in the hospital to bring him his glasses and his keys, he asked me if I believed in God. He's Jewish, by the way. And I said, God is in all the people who helped you last night. Because I don't know what God is, but I do know that when I stood up and called for help, people came and they saved him. And he's 60 years old and he has a new lease on life and 2 teenage kids. So if we're defining what God is, it was seeing all that goodness in people who are willing to be present, to do everything they could. I was busy praying after I put up the call for help and I let everybody else do the physical part, and so.
Thank you, Judy, so much for sharing.
Still trying
that.
to figure out what that all means.
Yeah.
How is he doing now?
They whisked him off to the hospital and he went right to the cath lab, and he had where plaques in the artery, they went and stented him, and he's home and he is doing well and he's committed to a new life.
Great.
Thank you, Judy. What I kept on getting a flash was, when you pass a work site, it says men at work. All I could see was a sign, God at work. Right. So yes, bottom of page 81, no thought at all can grasp God. Again, it's repeated, right? And yet,
Rabbi,
yeah, Jay.
I just want to go back to the poem that I read at the beginning.
Uh-huh.
It says that, in this nothing is separate and nothing in the world is excluded. It is all one continuous, harmonious existence in which we are all together as one. And I too have had an experience where I've called out for help and have had when someone was drowning and I couldn't get her out of the water. And people just came and helped pull us both back to the shore. And God was there.
Yeah, and look what's going on at Sunrise, right, in Florida, of which our beloved Chaya Lerner, who is not with us anymore, in the room.
Yeah, another.
She has been working nonstop to provide support and comfort to people. So yeah, God at work. And yet in Torah, the Holy One gives us a whisper. Moshe hears, I am the eternal being. I am being, calling being into being each moment. Here's a glimpse of the divine essence as existence itself. Through this hint, we begin to learn a name that is not a name transcending names, a name including and subsuming all names, and including and subsuming everything that you just pointed out, Jay. Right? The chapter on Yud He Vav He is very short, right? On actually the name itself. It's much shorter than naming things. But then Rabbi Marcia goes into Aleph. And how Aleph, the letter itself, can be seen as echad, as one. Of course, it is number one in gematria, but also that Yud, the gematria of Yud He Vav He equals, which is 26, equals the gematria of an Aleph, because an Aleph is made up of a Vav and two Yuds, one above the line and one below it, and that's 26. So if we want to have fun, playing with those kinds of things, some people think it's shtuyot, it's foolishness. And I happen to live in a house with someone who feels that way. However, if you abide by the magic, which I prefer to do, meaning that the world came into being and through speech, and speech is made up of these letters, and the letters themselves contain energy, and the energies group together, and right, and so on and so forth, then anything is possible. Who am I to say, that the mysteries within the mysteries, if it works for you, if it works for me. V'hu haya, v'hu hoveh, v'hu yihiyeh, in the first paragraph of the Name Beyond Name on page 84. And we're going to start to come in for a landing here. Where in our liturgy, okay, here's another test. If you get it, you get a ding. Where in the liturgy is the phrase v'hu haya, v'hu hoveh, v'hu yihiyeh? Deborah-esque.
In Adon Olam.
Ding, 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 ding. Ding. Next time, I promise I'll have a real sound effect. Wait a second. Okay, that was a good one too. In Adon Olam. So, the next time, just like with I said the next time we chant Baruch She'amar, and we recall how Rabbi Marcia unpacks it, you shouldn't allow that, even though we're dancing, we got our animals out, we're having a lot of fun. Adon Olam is really packed with a lot of theology and a lot of beautiful stuff, which I think I taught one night about a year ago. But what does it mean? And what is so special? Why about these letters and these words? Haya, Hoveh, Yihiyeh. What do you know about those? What those letters that make up those words? I should have brought a screen share so you can see the letters.
Well, they're all variations of Haya and Yehovah and the name of God. They're all
Exactly right. They're all permutations and different combinations. And on page 85, Rabbi Marcia lines up the letters, so you see how what was, what is, and what will be all adds up to literally Yud He Vav He. And we now have conflated is, was, and will be into 4 letters. Yud He Vav He. Is, was, will be becomes Yud He Vav He, and which is the way that I described when I had bar mitzvah students. That's my understanding of what we call God. God's real name is, was, will be, which they always love. So v'hu haya, v'hu hoveh, v'hu yihiyeh equals ehiyeh asher ehiyeh, right? It's the same way of saying this. It's a way of saying the same exact thing. The letter He appears twice, right? Yud He Vav He. So it must be, it's predominant in the word. And the letter He is breath itself, which is why Rabbi Art Waskow teaches that as we live, even if we are not aware, or even if we are not acknowledging it, every breath praises God. Kol haneshama tahalel. All right, that's our last test for the night. What psalm? We sing it every Shabbos morning.
Hallelujah.
It's in the Hallelujah prayer, but what's the number psalm? I'll give you a hint. It's the last psalm of the book of Psalms.
150.
Yeah, there you go. Ding, 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 ding. Hold on a second. You got another one. Okay, enough of that. So. Yes, so when we say Kol HaNeshama, every soul, remember, Neshama also shares the same letters as Neshima. Every breath praises Yah, right? Hallelujah. Yah, Yud, Hey, the first part of the unpronounceable name. So things start to come together, you know, and when I say make sense, it makes sense in terms of our liturgy, you know, and our sacred texts and the hidden mysteries in there. And maybe most importantly is how we can enter into more fully our prayers once we begin to unpack them for ourselves, whether it be, you know, in our beloved group here or, you know, or in, you know, study, you know, with another person or in a class. As always, I encourage you all to find a class. We can take classes everywhere. And I just learned today that in an email that's going to go out tomorrow is a link for classes that are being offered through Hartman and through for a limited time in a couple of weeks, and I think through Hadar or the Jewish Jewish Learning. It's on online. It's the big online. I forget. Anyway, there's links to that of how to find a class that fits you. And then when we're chanting anything on a Shabbos morning, and you really begin to pay attention to what we've sung 1,000 times, all of those hyperlinks open up. Right, the hyperlinks that got that got bookmarked by the study that you did, that the study that you're doing right now. So next time we sing Psalm 150, right, no matter what melody that we use, hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Every time we say hallelujah, a lot of haze in there, right? A lot of haze, a lot of opportunities to to just be aware of your breath, which of course is also part of our beloved community, the contemplative part of it, which is being aware of our breath, and our breath connects us to source, and source is connected to all, etc., etc., etc. It's all about the connections. Okay. Yes, and every breath is the divine name. Every time we breathe, the Yah, we're breathing God's name. Let's take a few minutes for any reflections. We've been on a journey these past five weeks, has it been? On the piggybacking on Reb Zalman's book, Jewish with Feeling. So I really sense that it's been it was a nice combination, a nice piggybacking. And I know, Dan, you're studying Mike Commons' book, which is also about prayer. Tell everybody the name of the book that you're studying with a group right now. Making Prayer Real. Yeah. And Reb Zalman's book on davening won an award. It's so accessible, and it just helps to make connections, and invites us into, and I suspect Mike's book does it too, although it's on my bookshelf, but I haven't read most of it, of how we make connections with our liturgy and our prayer, and whether or not even when we're not using liturgy, how to connect with prayer, as you were doing that night in the story you shared with us, of course, Judy. You just start praying, all of the prayers in our prayer books, the rabbis never intended that to be the be all and end all. They really wanted to be more like jazz, that we have a melody, a text to work with, and then you jam on that, you improvise on it. It's supposed to be both keva, fixed, and kavanah, and what comes, based upon what you're feeling in your life. The Psalms, if you look at the Psalms, they're all born of someone's great need to connect, someone's joy in connecting, someone's feeling nearness or distance from divinity. These are all real people, who created this poetry. And we had a fantastic moment in the meditation this afternoon where Helene Cass, she during the meditation, based upon the Hafiz poem that I shared, she wrote a poem, and it was actually extraordinary. And maybe I'll share it with everybody, in an email blast sometime. I have Helene's permission to do that. But that's what I mean. You enter more deeply into something, and then the well springs open up. There's the creator, and there's that which is waiting to be born. I'm going to repeat that because I don't think I've ever said it before. There is the wellspring, right? There is the source upriver, and there is that which is waiting downstream for the shefa to flow through the permeable container that we have created for ourselves, that is us, through which all of these secrets pass. And if we're ready to receive it, then we live our lives in that manner, and sometimes sacred poetry is born. I think that was my closing statement for the class. Yes, Dan, anybody have any closing thoughts on all of these weeks of study or anything from tonight?
No, I really appreciate a lot of the different ways that you and others are presenting this whole thing about God, this whole the names and the words and all this. And I still, of course, get hung up on not just the Hebrew words like Adonai, Melech, things like this, but also on the English translations, Lord, King, things like this. But keeping more in mind of what you've been talking about and what others have talked about.
Tell them my new name for God.
What's that?
My new name for God.
What's your new name for God?
Yeah, Atah with an ion, now. That's my new name for God.
What's wrong with future and past?
That's all in the now.
Okay, we'll compare and contrast later. The
Thank you, Mary Rita, for making a cameo appearance here.
Right.
It's, it's like Hitchcock, you know, in his movies. You know, you have to watch for him for that moment. Go ahead. Yeah.
No, I like the just to finish the whole was, is, will be type thing, because for me it brings up the whole sense of timelessness,
Mhm.
past, present, and future, and our existence is both physical and time, and it's the fourth dimension, and that's the flow of evolution and evolving and co-creation. So for me, it's all starting to come together like that.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Thank you, Dan, for sharing that. Judy, and then Huff.
I was just thinking about Adon Olam, because it can be sung to pretty much any tune. I mean, you know, the Coke song.
Judy, I don't know if
Ripple,
you're
whatever. I think it, oh,
you've been breaking up a lot, but you do return eventually.
okay, well, let me move.
Bad spot.
Can you hear me now?
We can.
Okay. I was just making the point that because Adon Olam can basically be sung to any tune, I don't know why that is musically, but at least that's what it seems like to me from, you know, long ago, being adapted to lots of different tunes, that it's easy to, I think, forget about the meaning of the prayer, you know, because it's so adaptable. And I guess I want to go back and look at it again, because there was this Aleph thing last week, like a fundraiser cabaret kind of thing, and Naomi Les sang a really beautiful Adon Olam tune, and anyway, it just made me think about wanting to go back and sort of study that more closely.
Yeah, that is so important, Judy. You know, it is a challenge for a shaliach tzibur / chazan / cantor, because people want to sing all the tones they know. But if you only sing the tunes you know, that's the danger, which is you just slip into a nice pair of PJs and you don't think, you know, that you've worn forever because it feels good. And now there is a lot to be said for that. That's important. But it doesn't lead itself necessarily to reinvestigating the text, which is what you were saying. Haf, please.
I used to work at an organization, and the key term that I liked, how we reacted, was structured flexibility. And what I've really been appreciating about all the readings we've done, and especially the way you've been presenting it or exploring it, has been, I'm less uptight about the individual words that are used and more concerned about the concepts, the beliefs, the framework, the interpretations. And what I have felt good about is that I feel less right and wrong and more what's right for me. And as I read the different books, especially Solomon, but also with her, and certainly with you, it's why I continue to want to learn more, because I think it allows me to expand my own personal horizons as I'm doing it. So I appreciate all that on all the readings we've done.
Gewalt, I don't know that a teacher can hear something more rewarding. Thank you. So that was a gift. Thank you so much for sharing that. Anybody else? Well, you do know now, and this is unplanned, what we're going to have to end with tonight. Let me actually pull up the Siddur, unless we all know it by heart, which is very possible because we've been singing it forever. I can screen share it. Is there people need me to screen share it? I will. Let me see.
Don't alum?
Of course.
Yeah.
And when we're at our synagogue retreat in West Virginia, we of course sing it to John Denver's Country Road.
Of course, of course.
Works beautiful.
Alrighty. Well, I'm not going to give you the sneak preview for this Shabbos, although I will tell you, because I told everybody last week that Renee and my 28th wedding anniversary is on Sunday, July 4th, and which is why I love being in shul in the Shabbos that is closest to July 4th, because then the two of us get up and we sing Adon Olam to Stars and Stripes forever, and it works, which you will see. But I'm not going to sing it for you now to those. But out of respect for Machaye Metim, of the return from almost seeming death to life, my beloved team, the Washington Nationals, seem to have come to life. Judy, when I turned it off, it was 15-5. So let's sing Adon Olam, of course, too.
And Trey hit for the cycle.
Yes, he did.
again.
And I actually, that's not what yeah. And I saw him hit for the cycle the last time he did it.
That's the third time in his career, which puts him at the top in Major League history.
So only two other people since
Right.
1903 have done it 3 times. So
Right.
for those of you who have no idea what we're talking about, it really is mystical, baseball. All right, here we go. Thank you, everybody.
Who are the other two?
I love you all. Adon Olam Asher Malach B'terem Kol Yitzir Nivra Li'ein Nasa V'chefso Kol Zay Melech Shemo Nikra V'yacharei Yimlach Hakol Levado Yimlach Nora V'hu Haya Vehu Hovev Yeh Betif Ara Ra 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 Rehu Echad V'yein Sheni Lahamshir Lo Lahach Bira B'li Reshit B'li Tachlit V'lo Ha'oz V'ha'misra V'hu Eli V'chaygo Ali V'tzur Chevli B'yitzarav Hu Nisi Manos Limanat Kosi B'yom Ekra Ra 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 B'yado Avkid Ruchi B'eit Ishan V'ya'ira V'im Ruchi Geviati Adonai Li V'lo Ira Adon Olam Asher Malach B'terem Kol Yitzir Nivra Li'et Nasa V'chefso Kol Azay Melech Shemoni. Gotta give Half a chance to play a little. Adonai li velo ira. Thank you all.
To answer your question, Adrian Beltre and a guy named Babe Herman from the 30s. Not Ruth, Babe Herman.
Thank you, Stephen, for bringing us up to date.
Well, I got that from one of my sports things. When it happened, they let you know these exciting things.
Alrighty. Well, I don't want to end on first base, second base, third base, or home plate, but next time I do a session on the Kabbalah of baseball and the spiritual essence of baseball, remember this moment. Good night, everybody. Love you all, and see hopefully most of you on Shabbat morning.